Welcome, I'm Mick, an ordinary lad, and this is Sovereign Warriors. So, what can we do to expose this corruption? To get it across to the people so they know what's going on properly and we can start standing up.
Yeah, I think we touched on it just a moment ago, and that's really by non-compliance. Again, we've talked about the taxes and council taxes, and a lot of people don't know that taxes is voluntary. There's no law in this country to say that we should pay taxes. And then there's a saying, no man or woman can own another man and woman, because that's slavery. Therefore, no man or woman can own another man's sweat and equity.
Yeah.
Because that's slavery.
Yeah.
So why are you paying, or why are we being forced to pay taxes from our labour and sex and equity?
Yeah, from sweat equity, yeah.
Because that's slavery. They're taking your money from you.
That you've created, you've earned.
As your sweat and equity. If you create something and then sell it, yes, I can understand that. So that's through commerce. So that makes a tax, because that's been created through that way. But then we've also got to look at the council tax. There's no law to actually pay council tax. Ask about it. They always may throw at you the 1992 Local Government Act, but there's no obligation or law to actually pay that. And the way we can do this, like for non-compliance, for people who feel that they can't stand up and go on these mass demonstrations and non-compliance to show our disconcernment about this treasonous act and this terror, and this and these enforced lockdowns and these rules that our government are trying to impose on us. And that's by non-compliance of non-payment of taxes. And what you can do, you ask these simple questions. We're entitled to ask these questions. In the end, we are sovereign as men and women. And we have created this government to answer for us. So we ask these questions. There's no law not to answer these questions. So where's our contract? Where's our agreement? Where's our obligations to pay these to pay these taxes? There's none. There's none whatsoever. So where's you got to look at, answer these and ask them to ask you back. And he says, and why you're waiting for these answers? He says, I don't refuse to pay these taxes. What I'll do is I'll withhold these payments until you can answer me my liability, my obligation. Where's the contract? Where's the law?
Because people have gone to prison over council tax because they've stood there and refused to pay it flat. Whereas if they turn around and say, I'm not refusing it, but I'm withholding it until you answer these questions, there's nothing they can do about that then.
As sovereign men and women, you have rights to ask your government, which we know our governments are there by consent and policed by consent.
Yeah.
So you have every right to ask it because they are working for you. So you need to ask these questions. Where's your obligation? Whose authority has it come from? Because you can guarantee there's no authority. For authority to be actually set in stone, there has to be someone's name and signed. And there's no signature.
They're never going to put the signature.
No one wants to be alive.
They can become accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're never going to put their name and signature on there.
So withhold these payments and ask these questions, because if you're complicit to these taxes, you can then. The government's treasonous. We've proven it's treasonous. They know they're treasonous. We've got evidence that they're treason. So you'll be complicit with that. You'll be complicit with the terrorism that's going on. And we know there's a terrorism act that the government have been accountable for terrorism. I think you might have some.
Well, I did. I mentioned it to, the Supreme Court turned around and said that UK PLC, which is a corporation is actually a terrorist organisation. That's the Supreme Court that said that.
Crazy.
That it is a terrorist organisation because they're manufacturing weapons out of taxes, they're committing genocide, like say at the moment in Gaza, killing kids and everything, with tax money, which they are not allowed to do under the Nuremberg trial. I think it comes under human rights, this, that and the other.
Exactly.
Which means you people can look all this up and you know then you haven't got to pay taxes.
Yep.
You haven't got to pay any taxes whatsoever. You can say to them, I'm not refusing, just prove to us that you ain't making weapons and you ain't doing this, because that makes them a terrorist organisation. And when they send the police out to collect things and they're called police officers now, not police constables, which means policy enforcement officer.
Policy enforcers,
and all they do is they're not there to serve us, they're there to serve this other corporation. Yeah, chief constables have even got their own corporations.
They have, yeah.
Yeah,
They've been
it's
registered.
all corporation on top of corporation on top of corporation. Yeah. It's all corrupt, it's all fraud against the people of this country.
Yeah. A very brave man, I don't know if anyone's heard of it, Gary Waterman. He's exposing this. He's an ex-copper.
18 years.
18 years.
Yeah, and he's exposing it all now.
And, and that goes through, as we mentioned before, Companies House, because we know this registration through the companies and all these other crowd agents have been registered with Companies House, and they know there's a fraud that's going on, and the corruption's going on. And not only that, but there's connections, worldwide connections through this corruption, and that all down leads to then the money laundering, the treasonous and the terrorism acts that they're doing, but also people trafficking and child trafficking. It's all connected, and it's absolutely it's disturbing, massively disturbing. Yeah. But as we say, the way we can do this is withhold these taxes until they can answer these questions. And what you can do, you can actually explain to them, I don't refuse to pay, as Mick has said, don't refuse to pay. But I'm withholding it because I believe that this and this and this has been happening. Can you tell me otherwise? And then for the interim period, what I'll do, I'll keep this into a separate bank account or into a trust.
Or into a trust would be better.
Yeah. And then I'll allow you 12 months to answer my questions. And if you haven't answered those questions...
you pocket the money.
You pocket the money. You've given them every opportunity. You stayed in honour. You tried to make remedy, and we can move forward on that. Okay, there's more evidence. What we know. I mean, a lot of people might not know this. There's a Michael Caine bit of a pun there. But did you know that the inner city of London is its own state?
Yeah.
So
along with the Vatican and Washington DC.
Along with the Vatican in Italy, along with the Washington DC, they are foreign states residing in the country.
Yeah.
So what you got to learn is that when these foreign states sit in the country, they have no jurisdiction when they step out of that thing. So you've got to look at our court system and our banking system. There's no banking fraternity as such in England. There's not.
No, there's
no finance at all in England itself, because that's all into the inner city of London.
Yeah, which is a foreign state.
Which has its own police.
Yeah.
It pays no taxes.
Yeah. But
it makes us pay every tax that you can think of, isn't it?
The Rothschilds own this, that's right, isn't it?
And they own it. And in fact, we also know this because our monarchy at the time, our Queen at the time, and now obviously our King, have to ask permission to enter the city of London, because
the inner city of London,
because it's a foreign state.
Yeah.
So what you've got to realise, being a foreign state has jurisdiction in its state, but nothing outside the state. So what's happening is these judges who swear an oath to the bar, which we know the bar is
part of the inner city of London.
Well, you're getting it, Mick. I like it. Great stuff. So when that comes there and they sit at court, because they have no jurisdiction, they entrap you to gain that jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So we stand under the common law, the law of the land, the natural laws of such, do no wrong, do no harm, fraudulently trespass. And that is law. So when we go into these courts, we're thinking rest, we're going in there, and they trick you into, as Mick might have mentioned before, they use certain legalese words, i.e. persons. They titlise you, which is another thing we can go down probably later, which is if you're a birth certificate, you've been made into corporation. So they title you to that. Because they have no jurisdiction, they gain that jurisdiction because they use maritime law. And that's why when you go into these courts, you end up to certain areas of there, you enter into a court is a birth, whatever, and it can go a little bit more
Well,
in depth.
there's a simple way to split them both apart. The British court system as such is based on the gospel. That is why you put your hand on a Bible and swear to God in a court.
Yes.
And that means you're following God's law. That's what it actually means.
God's law, yeah.
The word legal, if you dissect that, it actually means undoing God's law.
It does.
So what does that tell you?
Undoing God's law.
Undoing God's law.
And they hate that.
And they do hate it, but that's exactly what it means.
Yeah.
So legal doesn't apply to us. Legal applies only to corporations, not living man, living woman. The only things that apply to us or no harm, no loss, no fraud, no breach of the peace. Everything else, statutes, policies and acts, only apply to corporations. And living man and living woman is not a corporation. So it doesn't apply to us unless we consent or are tricked into consenting.
Yeah, because they created us at our birth into a corporation. But again, we won't go too in depth into that. So that's what they do. And because they have no jurisdiction when you walk in, they create a jurisdiction of maritime law.
Yeah.
And that's how then they can reside over it, because you're tricked and consented into this maritime law.
Yeah, thinking that you're in like a common law court sort of thing, and you're not at all.
And it's fraud. And it's fraud again. So these are the two ways we know now. We know that the treason. We know that the all statutes and acts from post 73 are null and void. We know that the corruption through the Crown Agents Act has been dissolved. That they're now all corporations, require contracts and consent. Yeah. They have no authority, the courts, because they're out of their jurisdictions, and they require consent again, and they try and change that round. So these are massive evidence.
They're
there.
basically taking the piss out of us.
They're taking the piss, yes.
Of course they are, heavily taking the piss.
And it is really as simple, and we try not to complicate things too much. And all you got to think is, we are sovereign. We are man and woman on this land as sovereign, and we then create. We created our governments, we created our parliament, we created our monarchy.
Anything we create, we are above.
Maxim in law. Yeah. Who creates, owns.
Yeah. So
we created it and we can own it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, we've managed to explain to each other, or we've managed to explain to the people out there what the situation is, why it's fraud, why it's corruption, why they've got no power whatsoever. Yeah. Is there anything on top of that you would like to add?
Yeah, just to finish off, probably much, matey. And we just need to understand it's not complicated at all. It really isn't. We just have to be sovereign in our own, stand our ground. We are men and women at the end of the day. I take it as like, if you've got children and you have children and they came home from school and they've been bullied, and it's upsetting, it's crying. I mean, we've probably all experienced it at some time in our lives. So we tell them to stand up to these bullies. We tell them that if you don't stand up to them, it will get worse and will get worse.
Yeah.
So we tell them to go and do that and go back to school. So now, as men and women, we're grown ups. It's our turn to stand up against the bullies, because that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're bullying it by coercion, harassment, intimidation, and they got nothing at all, because once you know that it's you who's sovereign and who's the man and women of this, who creates this, and then you have the authority over them, then we can then make the change. And there's a few things there. So if you speak the truth, I always say speak the truth, because the truth will always come out. So speak the truth, and the light will always shine through, even on the darkest of days, mate. Yeah. It really do, and it's such a fantastic saying. And for tyranny to work, for tyranny to succeed in society, it only takes a few good men and women not to do anything. But for tyranny to fail in society, it only takes a few good men to stand up against it, and that's all we have to do.
And what do they say? Inaction is a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Because if you don't stand up and do something, they're going to go as far as they can with it. Of course they are. Inaction is no good to anybody. Yeah. We need to start standing up to these people, to this government, to the police, to the courts, because it's all corrupt, and we're sovereign, not them.
Be an example for your children, because we're doing this. It's all about our children.
Our kids and grandkids.
It's their future, and they're destroying that. So
if we don't stand up for them now, they won't be able to stand up.
Peacefully.
Yeah, of course.
And non-compliance, and making a very strong, powerful message that we won't stand for this anymore. You know, and that if we do that en masse, believe me, we will see a better days for our children.
Yeah, thank you very much for explaining that.
No, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
No problem whatsoever. And I hope you lot out there have got that now. It hasn't gone over your head too much, because you are sovereign. These are terrorists. Like I say, the Supreme Court said that the UK PLC is a terrorist organisation. You can look that up. So, you know, what more evidence do you need? We need to start standing up, and we need to start forming rapid response groups all up and down the country, so that we can protect our communities when they're taking people's houses off them, using immigrants that have just come in, and they're giving them badges to go and start taking people's properties. They've got no right to do this. They've got no right whatsoever. And that's just one example. And it goes on much further, and it goes much deeper, as Darren said. So we need to start standing up and doing things.
Definitely,
There you go.
definitely.
That's
We've got
it.
the evidence.
Yeah,
Let's use it.
yeah, very
Brilliant.
much so.
Cheers, matey.
Job done.